Today marks 2 months since the ceasefire between America and Iran took effect, and also the most significant violation yet of that ceasefire. Overnight, Iran fired several salvos of ballistic missiles at Israel, and Israel has now retaliated with airstrikes in Iran.
So, Greg, just fill in for us exactly what happened overnight.
So first we saw Iran launch several waves of ballistic missiles at Israel. This was late on Sunday night local time, which the Iranians said they were doing in response to Israeli airstrikes in the Lebanese capital earlier in the weekend. Israel said those missiles were intercepted. There were no reports of significant damage on the ground. Then a few hours later, we saw Israel launch a wave of airstrikes in Iran. It attacked missile sites there, also a petrochemical plant and other targets in Iran. And then as we're speaking now, on Monday morning, there are reports just coming out of Israel that sirens are going off and that there are more waves of incoming Iranian missiles aimed at both the north and the center of the country. There was an attack as well by the Houthis in Yemen, the Iranian-backed Shia militia there, which carried out an attack on Israel.
So why exactly did Iran attack Israel?
For 2 months since the ceasefire took hold in April, there's been a dispute between America, Israel, and Iran over whether that ceasefire would also include Lebanon, a cessation of Israeli attacks on Lebanon. So if you go back to the first days of the deal in early April, once it was agreed, Iran said it wouldn't abide by the ceasefire unless Donald Trump restrained the Israelis in Lebanon. And he eventually did that. He didn't tell them to halt their attacks entirely, but he ordered Israel to halt the geographic scope and the intensity of its airstrikes in Lebanon. Now, obviously, Israel has always rejected this linkage. It understandably is unhappy about the idea that Iran could impose conditions on its war in Lebanon. And so Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister, has always insisted that these two conflicts should be separate. And what we've seen over the past few weeks has been Israel intensifying its combat in Lebanon. Hezbollah has continued to fire at northern Israel. It has been using, in some cases, fiber optic drones that Israel doesn't have a reliable way to defend against, to kill Israeli troops, both in Lebanon and in northern Israel, and to attack civilian targets in northern Israel. And this has put a lot of pressure on Netanyahu's government. And so we've seen him expand the scope of airstrikes in Lebanon, including the strike in Beirut, the capital, over the weekend. He's ordered Israeli troops further into Lebanon. And so for Iran now, the message that they are sending is that they insist on these two conflicts being linked. And if Israel does continue to carry out these attacks in Lebanon, it has threatened to carry out further attacks on Israel.
And Israel, in turn, is now sending quite a clear message to Iran, right?
It is. And I think particularly this strike on a petrochemical plant is significant for two reasons. One is the impact that it will have on the Iranian energy sector, the Iranian economy. And then there's also the question of how Iran views that attack and how they will retaliate for it. They have treated these sorts of attacks in the past as being major escalations. We saw that happen in March when Israel bombed a petrochemical facility in southern Iran. The next day, Iran launched a missile attack on the gas liquefaction plant in Qatar, which caused extensive damage there. It fired at a Saudi oil refinery. So will they follow a similar logic here, either attacking economically significant targets in Israel, or perhaps widening the war horizontally and going back to attacks on Gulf states? Now, I think it's riskier if they attack Gulf states because they risk America getting into the conflict as well, and they risk the ceasefire falling apart entirely. But there is a fear here in the Gulf this morning that they might once again find themselves on the receiving end of Iranian attacks.
And Greg, where does Donald Trump stand in all of this?
Depends what time of day you reach him on the phone and what mood he's in. I mean, as usual, the public messaging that we've heard, both what Trump has said personally and the leaks that are coming out of the administration overnight, make it seem as if he's very unhappy with these Israeli strikes on Iran. A journalist from the FT called him up in the middle of the night. He answered. He said, Netanyahu has to accept whatever deal I impose. I call the shots. He doesn't call the shots. Remarkable thing for the president of the United States to say about Israel. Also remarkable that Trump is apparently taking phone calls from journalists in the middle of what you would think is a crisis situation in the White House. So we heard that from him, and we've heard reports in Fox News and elsewhere that the president supposedly told the Israelis that he's had enough and this needs to stop. Now, that's what we're hearing in public. I don't know if that's what the Israelis are hearing in private. I would be surprised if Trump had laid down a clear red line for Netanyahu, had told him, you cannot retaliate for this. I think more likely he is saying this in public to avoid antagonizing the Iranians, but in private, he told the Israelis they have a green light to retaliate so long as they stay within certain parameters. They don't do anything too massive in Iran. I suspect that is what happened here, despite the appearance of a conflict in public.
So where does this leave the ceasefire between US and Iran?
Hanging by a thread, hanging by a slimmer thread than at any point in the previous 2 months. You know, whenever we've talked about this ceasefire since April, I've been saying I think both America and Iran want to abide by the deal. They see it as being in their interests to reach a more durable agreement rather than to resume the war and go another even more destructive round of fighting. And I still think that's the case, even after what's happened over the weekend. America has not gotten involved directly. It hasn't carried out its own strikes in Iran. I think it is trying to somewhat restrain the Israelis behind the scenes. And Iran, not to minimize or dismiss the fact that it's firing ballistic missiles at Israel, but it has fired much larger salvos in the past. So I think it is trying to preserve a bit of an off-ramp here. So at some point, the onus here really is on the Americans, on the Trump administration. Are they going to call a halt to this? Are they going to tell Israel, at this point, you cannot carry out any further attacks against Iran? Or are they going to let this keep going and risk, again, a possible resumption of the war, resumption of attacks on Gulf states? There's a lot riding here on the hope that there will be no significant damage caused by this exchange of fire, and this will stay within certain parameters. But the longer it goes on, I think the harder it's going to be to restrain this.
Gregg, thank you for talking to me.
Thank you, Rosie.